3 days before the annual corporate gala, my wife Serena stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her gold necklace. Her reflection stared back at me as I entered the room, a faint but unmistakable smile playing on her lips. "You don't have to come this time," she said lightly, her voice tinged with a casualness that felt almost too deliberate. At first, I brushed it off. Serena often said things like this, not wanting me to feel obligated to attend her work events. But this time, something about the way she said it stuck in my mind. There was a flicker in her eyes, a flash of something I couldn't quite place. "Why not?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and watching her closely. "It's just one of those boring work things," she replied, her tone airy. "A bunch of advertising executives patting themselves on the back. I'll be home before you know it." It wasn't the words that lingered, it was the delivery. Serena had always been a social butterfly, thriving in the spotlight and charming everyone in the room. In our 25 years of marriage, I'd attended countless galas, fundraisers, and networking events by her side. She never hesitated to show me off, to introduce me as Thomas, my better half. But this time, she seemed different. I shrugged off the unease, telling myself I was imagining things. But as the days passed, that odd smile of hers replayed in my mind like a broken record. It was the kind of smile that hinted at secrets, and secrets had no place in the life we had built together. "My name is Thomas Reed. I am 47 years old, a senior account executive at a major manufacturing firm. By all accounts, I've lived a charmed life, one marked by success, stability, and love." Serena and I met in 5th grade in our quiet Georgia hometown. She was the new girl with golden hair and a confidence that made her stand out among the other kids. I was smitten from the start, though it took years for me to work up the courage to talk to her. By high school, we were inseparable. I asked her to prom with a handwritten note slipped into her locker, and she said yes with a smile that could have stopped traffic. Our small-town romance blossomed into something real, something lasting. When we both got into the University of Georgia, it felt like fate. We shared a tiny apartment off campus, scraping by on part-time jobs and student loans. Those were some of the best years of my life. Nights spent dreaming about our future, mornings filled with the smell of cheap coffee and the sound of her humming in the kitchen. We got married a week after graduation. Our wedding was modest, held in the backyard of her parents' house, but it was perfect. Serena walked down the aisle in a borrowed dress, her smile brighter than any diamond. Our lives evolved quickly after our modest wedding. Serena and I moved into a small rental in the heart of Atlanta, where opportunities seemed endless. I had just landed an entry-level job at a manufacturing firm, a position that barely paid enough to cover our rent. Serena, always ambitious, found a position as a junior designer at a local advertising agency. Those early years were challenging but exciting. We spent countless late nights brainstorming ideas for our future, sharing dreams of one day owning a home near the water. Every penny was carefully budgeted. Serena handled the groceries while I managed the bills, often leaving just enough for a Friday night treat, usually takeout pizza and a rented movie. Despite the financial strain, we were happy. Serena's creativity blossomed at work, and she quickly earned a reputation for her innovative ideas. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my job, determined to climb the corporate ladder. 3 years into our marriage, our daughter Ella was born. I remember the moment Serena placed her in my arms for the first time. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Ella became the center of our world, and every decision we made revolved around giving her the best life possible. When Ella was 5, we achieved our dream of buying a home. It wasn't the lakeside mansion we'd eventually own, but it was ours, a modest 3-bedroom house with a yard big enough for a swing set. Serena painted the nursery herself, choosing soft yellow walls that seemed to glow in the sunlight. As the years passed, our careers flourished. Serena's knack for visual storytelling earned her a promotion to creative director, and her salary doubled practically overnight. I, too, climbed the corporate ranks, becoming the youngest regional account manager in my firm's history. With our combined incomes, we decided it was time to upgrade. That's when we found the property on Lake Sheridan, a foreclosure with potential. The house was in shambles when we first saw it, but Serena could already picture what it could become. "This is it," she said, her green eyes sparkling. This is where we'll grow old together. The renovations were grueling. Every spare moment was spent tearing down old wallpaper, sanding floors, and painting walls. Serena designed every detail, from the kitchen backsplash to the custom bookshelves in the living room. By the time we finished, the house was unrecognizable, a stunning lakeside retreat that felt like an extension of Serena's creative vision. Ella grew up in that house. She learned to swim in the lake, hosted sleepovers in the finished basement, and spent countless summer evenings roasting marshmallows by the fire pit. It was a house full of laughter and love, or so I believed. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment I began to sense that something wasn't right. It was subtle at first, a missed goodnight kiss, a distracted look during dinner, an unexplained late meeting. Serena's job had always been demanding, but in the last few years, it seemed to consume her. She started spending more nights away from home, attending networking events and client dinners. When I asked about them, she'd wave me off with a smile and a quick reassurance. "It's just work, Thomas," she'd say. "You know how it is." I wanted to believe her. After all, Serena had always been honest with me, or so I thought. I told myself that her job was simply stressful, that her late nights were a sign of her dedication, not a symptom of something darker. But then there were the phone calls. I'd walk into the room, and Serena would quickly end a conversation, slipping her phone in her pocket with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd shrug and say, "Just a client." I brushed it off, convincing myself that I was overthinking things. Serena was my wife, my partner, the woman I had loved since childhood. Why would she lie to me? The night of the gala arrived, and despite Serena's insistence that I stay home, I decided to attend. Something about her demeanor had been bothering me all week, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see for myself. When Serena walked down the stairs in a shimmering black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, my breath caught. She was stunning, more radiant than I had seen her in years. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her green eyes sparkled with excitement. "You look incredible," I said, meaning every word. She smiled but didn't respond, her eyes darting toward the clock. "We should go," she said, grabbing her clutch. The gala was held at an upscale downtown venue, a grand ballroom filled with glittering chandeliers and elegantly dressed attendees. As we entered, it became clear that Serena was the star of the evening. Colleagues greeted her with warmth, their smiles lingering a little too long. Then I saw him, Mark Ashton. He was tall, silver-haired, and exuded the kind of confidence that comes from years of success. As soon as he spotted Serena, his face lit up with a smile that felt too intimate. "Thomas, this is Mark," Serena said, placing her hand lightly on his arm. I extended my hand, forcing a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." Mark's handshake was firm, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me uneasy. "I've heard a lot about you," he said, his tone friendly but laced with something I couldn't quite identify. As the evening progressed, I couldn't help but notice the way Serena interacted with Mark. Their conversations were easy, their laughter genuine. And then there were the glances, subtle but telling. I tried to enjoy the evening, but my focus kept drifting back to Serena and Mark. She was animated in her conversations with him, her laugh a little louder than usual, her hand brushing his arm in a way that felt too familiar. From across the room, I watched as Mark leaned in to whisper something in her ear. Serena smiled. No, smirked, and nodded, her eyes sparkling with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. It was a smile I thought she had reserved for me. As the night wore on, I found myself playing detective, cataloging every interaction between them. The way his hand lingered on her back, the way her body angled toward him, the way they seemed to share a private world amidst the crowd. "Thomas, you look tense," Serena said as she returned to our table with a glass of wine. "Just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's been a long week." She nodded, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. The breaking point came on the dance floor. Serena and I had always enjoyed dancing together. It was one of the few traditions we had kept alive over the years. But that night, something was different. She seemed distracted, her movements stiff and uncoordinated. Her eyes kept darting across the room, searching for someone. I didn't have to guess who. When I spun her, I caught a glimpse of Mark standing near the bar, watching us with a smug grin. It was as if he knew something I didn't, as if he was daring me to confront him. I pulled Serena closer, lowering my voice. "Is everything okay?" "Of course," she said, her smile faltering for a brief moment, but her eyes betrayed her. By the time we got home, the tension was unbearable. Serena kicked off her heels and started up the stairs, but I stopped her. "Wait," I said, my voice firm. "We need to talk." She turned, her expression wary. "About?" Serena's excuses poured out in a desperate rush. "It wasn't serious," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It didn't mean anything." "It didn't mean anything?" I repeated, incredulous. "You risked our marriage, our family, for something that didn't mean anything?" She sobbed, begging me to forgive her, but her words felt hollow, her tears insincere. The damage was done, and there was no going back. The next day, Ella called. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Ask your mother," I said, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. She hesitated, then said, "She told me you're overreacting, that it was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" The words ignited a fresh wave of anger. "It's not a misunderstanding, Ella," I said. "Your mother betrayed me." To my dismay, Ella sided with Serena. "Dad, it's not that big of a deal," she said dismissively. "People make mistakes." "Mistakes?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "This wasn't a mistake, Ella. This was a calculated choice." But Ella refused to see it. "You're being dramatic," she said. "Mom still loves you." Her words felt like a slap in the face. My own daughter, the one person I thought would understand, had turned against me. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, financial maneuvers, and tense interactions with Serena. I filed for divorce, determined to sever every tie to the woman who had betrayed me. I also made the painful decision to withdraw from Ella's wedding. If she wanted to invite Mark and continue supporting her mother's actions, I couldn't be part of it. Without my financial support, Serena's life began to unravel. The house, the car, the lifestyle she had built on my trust, all of it crumbled. Mark's wife, armed with the evidence I provided, filed for divorce and had him removed from their company. With his career in ruins, Mark could no longer support Serena. Life after the confrontation was eerily quiet. Serena and I had agreed to live under the same roof temporarily as the divorce proceedings were underway, but the air in the house was thick with tension. We passed each other like strangers, speaking only when absolutely necessary. Serena, once full of confidence, now seemed like a shadow of her former self. She tried to make amends, cooking my favorite meals, leaving notes on the counter, even attempting small talk at breakfast. But every gesture felt forced, her guilt seeping through her every action. I spent most of my time at work or out of the house, avoiding her as much as possible. When I wasn't working, I was meticulously organizing my finances, ensuring that every penny was accounted for. Serena had no idea how much I had already moved into separate accounts, or that the house she loved so much was now a liability she would soon have to bear alone. My relationship with Ella grew increasingly strained. She continued to defend her mother, insisting that I was overreacting. Her refusal to see Serena's betrayal for what it was left me feeling isolated and heartbroken. One evening, Ella called, her tone cold and detached. "Dad, I don't understand why you're making this so difficult. Mom's trying to fix things. Why can't you just forgive her?" "Forgive her?" I replied, my voice heavy with disbelief. "Ella, this isn't about a simple mistake. She made a choice that destroyed our family." Ella sighed, clearly frustrated. "You're acting like you've never made a mistake. People aren't perfect, Dad." Her words stung. I wanted to remind her of all the sacrifices I had made for our family, all the times I had put their happiness above my own. But instead, I simply said, "When you're ready to have an honest conversation, you know where to find me." The ripple effects of Serena's affair extended far beyond our family. Mark's wife, Meredith, had been relentless. After receiving the evidence I provided, Not only did she file for divorce, but she also leveraged her position at their advertising agency to have Mark terminated. Without his job, Mark's financial stability crumbled. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had moved out of his upscale condo and was now renting a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. His once pristine reputation was tarnished, and his social circle had all but disappeared. Serena, too, felt the impact of his downfall. With his support gone, she was left to face the harsh reality of her choices. The luxury vacations, the shopping sprees, the extravagant dinners, they were all relics of a life she could no longer afford. The day Serena received the foreclosure notice was the day I knew I was finally free. She had ignored the mounting bills for months, convinced that I would swoop in to save her. But I had no intention of rescuing her from the mess she had created. When she confronted me, her voice was a mixture of anger and desperation. "Thomas, you can't just let the house go. This is our home." "No, Serena," I replied, my tone cold and unwavering. "This was your home, and you made it clear you didn't value it or me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. I had spent too long trying to fix a marriage that she had already destroyed. With the divorce finalized, I packed my belongings and left the house for good. I bought a small property in Florida, a modest beachside cottage that felt like a sanctuary. My days were simple but fulfilling. I took long walks along the shore, spent afternoons reading on the porch, and rediscovered hobbies I had long forgotten. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I occasionally heard updates about Serena and Ella. They had moved into a cramped apartment in a less-than-ideal neighborhood, struggling to make ends meet. Mark had disappeared from their lives entirely, leaving Serena to face the consequences of her actions alone. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of Serena's betrayal had been overwhelming, but it had also forced me to confront truths I had long ignored. I had spent so much of my life building a future for my family, sacrificing my own happiness for theirs. But in the end, it was those sacrifices that had given me the strength to rebuild. Freedom wasn't just about leaving behind a toxic relationship. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, my dignity, and my happiness. As the waves crashed against the shore, I smiled to myself. My life was far from perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, that was enough.